Now, amid the resumption of the ground offensive against Hamas, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has said that Israel was not ready to give up on the release of women hostages held by Hamas, adding that the terror group will not release them from their captivity. He informed, however, that the US was looking at negotiations to broker a fresh ceasefire and ensure the release of the remaining hostages. He, however, declined to weigh in on whether Israel has been more precise in its military operations to Gaza to avoid further civilian casualties. Top US officials, meanwhile, ramped up their warnings about protecting civilian lives as Israel expands its offensive to southern Gaza. Let's quickly listen into what he had to say.
Look, the basic bottom line when it comes to where we are in the hostage negotiations is that the first phase of the hostage negotiation was about the release of women and children. Hamas continues to hold women, civilian women, and will not release them. And Israel is not prepared to close the book on those women or to give them up. So Israel is insisting that Hamas follow through on the release of those women. And then Israel has said if Hamas is prepared to follow through on that, Israel is absolutely prepared to discuss additional categories of hostages, civilian men, the wounded, and ultimately all of the hostages, the IDF soldiers being held there. We, the United States, of course, look at that negotiation and think, okay, how do we get back to it? The easiest, most straightforward way to get back to it would be for Hamas to be held accountable for not following through on its end of the bargain. Look, the basic bottom line.
Of course, viewers, there you heard Jake Sullivan. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast is Mr. Sanjeev Srivastava. He's an international affairs expert. Good morning, sir, and thank you so much for joining in on NewsX. Now, this is essentially what Jake Sullivan has pointed out. He said that Israel is not giving up on women hostages held by the Hamas. They are, in fact, trying to broker another ceasefire, but of course, time will tell what's going to happen on that front. Sir, over to you. What do you make of this development?
Very good morning to you. Good morning to all the viewers. You know, Israel is not going to give up on any of the hostages, whether it is women or children or elderly people, men. I think everyone is precious and every life is precious, and Israel will pursue hard Hamas so that they release those hostages under their captivity. And that's what Israel has been insisting upon. You know, the Hamas had promised during this entire negotiation, which was brokered by, obviously, by Qatar and Egypt, that they will release all women and children. But at the end of the process, they have still retained many of women hostages. And now I think there are elderly people, sick, injured people. There are several hostages, about 137, in number, to be precise, are still there in Hamas's captivity. So I think Hamas is still keeping those hostages until the time those hostages are released from their captivity. Israel is not going to, release any kind of pressure on Hamas, and obviously Israel will continue its operations against Hamas, and it will certainly pressurize, Hamas to come up with negotiations and the release of those hostages. So I think Israel is quite clear on that. And second point is that Israel's war against terrorism will continue till the time Israel is assured that no other terrorist activities like the sort of October 7 terrorist attack is not repeated till the time that kind of assurance Israel gets. Until they are not going to stop. And now on the northern Gaza, their operation is almost complete, but now they are operating, IDF is operating in southern Gaza, and their precise target is to end the Hamas's rule from Gaza and to put forth government, be it Palestinian authorities or whichever and whatever the form of government, alternate form of government is to be formed, that will be formed. And that's what Israel wants to ensure. Because if you know, Sabri, that if in Gaza Hamas remains intact, then whenever Israel will go ahead with any kind of a normalization process, any kind of a peace process or regional integration process, Hamas might come up with bigger attacks. And that's what the biggest fear of Israel. And if in the future also, any normalization process, any I2U2, any Middle East, India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor-like initiatives had to succeed, then that has to be protected from these terrorist conspiracies. And that is precisely what Israel wants to get assurance at this point of time. Until the time that assurance, that security guarantees are given to Israel, I don't think that Israel is going to stop. But one thing is quite certain, that Israel is also very careful that humanitarian casualties should not be there, and they are trying their best to, minimize civilian casualties, collateral damages. At the same time, Israel is also keeping a very close watch on the fact that this war must not get escalated into a regional conflict.
Right. So, of course, Israel is now trying to be very careful that there aren't any humanitarian casualties. But meanwhile, they're still very, very clear on their stance. So, with that in focus, do you think the U.S. will be able to broker a ceasefire?
Probably permanent ceasefire is still a distant point, and I do not think that it is going to happen anytime soon. As I said, that till the time Israel gets a total security guarantee that no such terrorist attack will be done against Israel, and I'm very sure that the Israeli leadership is very much determined that Hamas must not rule Gaza anymore, and which they are ruling from 2007 onwards. So I think until the time the Hamas's rule is continuing in Gaza, I do not think that Israel is going to stop. I think the regime has to be changed, because this was a regime of terror. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they have been ruling Gaza, and that's why they could carry out such attack. So I think the first and primary target in my assessment is that to bring about a change in the rule of Gaza, and Hamas must not rule Gaza anymore. And if that happens, then I think certainly the Israel will get a sort of a security guarantee that no other governing body from Gaza will attack on Israel in such a way that that's the way Hamas did on October 7. So I think that is what Israel's prime intention is, to change the rule of Hamas in Gaza.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.